welcome to episode 127 of Retro Encounter, RPG fans' topic-specific weekly podcast. I'm Mike Sollosi, I'm your host for today, and with me are two retro regulars, starting with Peter Triezenberg.
I'm a regular, even though I haven't been on the podcast for like a month or so, but hi, Peter Triezenberg, the Furious Bean.
You know, you say that, and it has been a few months, I think, but you're still on the list of like top 5, top 6 most regularly appearing guests. So yeah, you're a regular, Peter. Come on.
Okay, I appreciate that, Mike. Thank you.
And now someone who's been as regular as a bowel movement this month, Keegan Lee.
Hey, everybody.
Thanks for that, Keegan. Thanks.
You're welcome.
That's a really sideways way to insult somebody.
Yeah, well, Keegan has been quite busy in the month of March on Retro Encounter, and I'm grateful for it, Keegan. But we are here to discuss something very specific, and that is RPG adaptations. Now, 2 weeks ago, you may remember we had an episode about RPG spin-offs, which was, point A, an RPG, point B, a game that is not an RPG, but based on the materials of that RPG. So, your Dissidia Final Fantasies and Theater Rhythm Final Fantasies and what have you. But now we're going in the other direction. Instead of things that spun off out of RPGs, we're having RPG be the second part of that equation. Basically defining an RPG adaptation as something that was not an RPG and then was adapted into a video game RPG later. So we're going to be going down a big list that we have in a Google Doc and discuss in brief detail our favorite RPG adaptations, existing ones. And then at the end of the episode, similar to 2 weeks ago, we're each going to pitch an unmade, hypothetical, theoretical RPG adaptation. How does that sound to you guys?
Sounds perfect.
That sounds good to me.
All right. So, Keegan, take a look at that list and pick something from it and decide where we're going to start.
Let's start with what I consider one of the bigger Western RPGs coming out right now, the Witcher series.
Right. Now, I should mention that I have not played any of The Witcher except for maybe 4 hours of the first game and really didn't like it. But I'm aware that it is a Polish series of fantasy novels from the 90s, I guess, that have
Yes.
that are sort of cult fan favorites. And it probably goes without saying, The Witcher 2 and Witcher 3 are very successful, very popular RPGs. So, Keegan, tell us a little bit about your experience with The Witcher.
So, my experience, I actually entered the series with The Witcher 2, Assassins of Kings on the... So I didn't really jump in. I'd consider a good starting point. A lot of the story has already taken place there. A lot of characters have already been introduced. It's very rough for a newcomer. However, thanks to the popularity of the video game series, now over in the US and I believe other Western countries, we now have the book series available. All of them taking place before even the first game starts. And I would honestly consider them some of the best fantasy novels I've ever read.
All right, but you said that all of the events of those novels take place before The Witcher 1?
Yes.
Okay.
So for those who did play The Witcher 1, you may remember Geralt talking of an event where he was killed in a town. I forget exactly which town. It's been a while since I played 1. But that killing of Geralt is actually where the book series ends. So when Geralt comes back and everyone's like, Geralt, you remember me, right? And he's like, nope, amnesia. All of those characters have an appearance in the book. Some of them play major roles throughout the story,
That's
such
cool.
as Dandelion the Bard and whatnot. I feel if you're a fan of the video games and you haven't read the books, I think it's a major opportunity for you to take. You will gain so much more insight into the story. You learn so much more about Yennefer and Ciri, like the 3 main players. Just read the books. I promise you, it is worth it.
That sounds like a much more exciting prospect than playing The Witcher 1 again, because I truly did not like that thing.
From what I understand, isn't the Witcher series, by and large, the video games have no involvement from the author himself? He was kind of just handed a sack of cash and kind of thinks the whole thing is dumb. Because
Yes, the author. Sorry to interrupt, but the author has stated, I believe numerous times, that he does not care for the video game series. He's not a big fan of video games in general. So,
I mean, you wouldn't kill off your main character of your series only to be like, oh yeah, and then there's this whole other series. No, he's totally fine. He just has amnesia. I haven't played the games myself. Witcher 3 has always been something of a curiosity to me because I really admire the ambition and scope of its world. And I'm always down for like literary fantasy. I've read tons of fantasy lit growing up, so this series has always intrigued me. I did read somewhere basically that the third game in particular draws in a lot more from the books, doesn't it?
Yes, specifically involving the introduction of Ciri, Geralt's adoptive daughter.
Right.
I would say the main character of the books more than Geralt, to be honest. A lot of it is her coming of age and discovering abilities, and I don't want to spoil too much, but it's her coming of age story.
Well, you already spoiled that he dies in the last one, so I think we've already crossed that bridge, dude.
Are all the books available in English now?
Yes, it actually took quite a while. I think we got the last book around 2016, 2017. It was a bit after The Witcher 3 released.
Right, okay.
So, but yeah, they were originally written in the early 90s, I believe, early to mid, and then we started getting the adaptations in America around the mid 2000s.
That's probably either right around when the first Witcher came out, or maybe a bit before it.
But I think it took until Witcher 3 almost for it to really gain traction, because I always remember The Witcher being this kind of like Witcher 2 was around the time a lot of people started really talking about this series in any capacity other than, well, that was a game. But I don't know. I could just be spitballing.
Well, no, I remember there was significant buzz around the first game, like because people that really like like old school style Western RPGs really liked The Witcher.
Oh yeah, it definitely would have had an audience.
Yeah,
but,
and each one definitely got better and more accessible and mainstream than the previous one. With The Witcher 3 being one of the biggest games of its year, I guess that would have been 2015, maybe. I don't remember. No, 26. It doesn't matter. But yes, The Witcher and fantasy novels are definitely occult hits that I have heard good things about, and Keegan, I guess, can corroborate those good reviews I've heard. But let's talk about a different series of novels that got adapted into RPGs. Peter, I think you're a fan of these, if I know you, and I know you a little bit. So what can you tell us about the various Lord of the Rings RPGs that we've had over the years?
Oh, man. So the Lord of the Rings is being one of the most, probably the pinnacle of a lot of fantasy literature. It's been getting adaptations for ages. Right down to, I think there was wasn't there an NES or Super NES Lord of the Rings game that was...
Oh, I have no idea.
Yes, there was. I remember, because it involved majorly the Four Hobbits, I believe. I don't think it was a very good game, but...
No, I just remember hearing about it a while ago. But around the time of the Peter Jackson films is when we got a pretty huge buff of Lord of the Rings related media, and video games included. I believe Electronic Arts had the movie license for the longest time, although there were a few exceptions. But probably the biggest example, and I think the one that we would have the most familiar with, is Lord of the Rings: The Third Age.
Right. I am a little familiar with that one, but I haven't played it myself personally.
It is a bizarre. So somewhere down the line, they have the Lord of the Rings movies have completed their run. Electronic Arts wants to keep making money off of this series, and they sat down and said to themselves, "What if we took Final Fantasy X and gave it a Lord of the Rings skin, and we made that with our crappy stand-ins for each fellowship member and the most threadbare plot you could possibly imagine, short of just reading the cliff notes to the books."
When I was watching my friend play that at my dorm room in Charlottesville, Virginia, many years ago, I think the "hey, that's kind of like FF10" comment came out of someone's mouth 20 times. It really looks like it.
It's the same. And all things considered, it's the same basic system. You have a turn meter. You have the option to swap in party members.
It even has the portraits of the next character actions on the left side.
Yeah, it does. It's not even. It's really not even trying. And the plot is the most threadbare. You are literally a group of Fellowship fanboys who are following the Fellowship of the Ring around through the movies. Telekinetically tells you the plot through clips from the movies. I didn't make a word of that up. That is what happens.
Oh,
and then at the end, you're teleported on top of Barad-dûr to fight the Eye of Sauron.
Huh.
That was the last fight. I forgot about that.
You literally get teleported from Pelennor Fields to the top of Barad-dûr for no reason other than it is time for this game to end.
Okay, now I'm not sure if you've communicated this clearly to me, Peter. Is this game good? Because I remember my friend Byron playing it years ago, liking it, but I think he would have played anything with Lord of the Rings on it. Like with some perspective, do you think this is a good RPG?
Well, Mike, there's a thing about that question. Is FF10 good? Do you like FF10? If
Sure,
so,
yeah.
well, and that's the thing. And Third Age has a weird amount of production design behind it because it's got Electronic Arts' money with their big movie license. It's polished. Like, I don't think you're gonna like bug out of the environment. It looks authentic. It uses all the music is ripped straight from the Howard Shore soundtrack, and that's always good. It is bizarrely playable, even though it's kind of anathema. Like that's the Third Age. It's this weird thing that shouldn't exist but does, and we are better for it. Oh, actually, I forgot to. I should mention this before we move on. You can play as the Balrog.
What?
Yeah, so one of there aren't really much in the way of side quests or optional content in the Third Age. It's pretty much a straight run through the game. But one thing that there is evil mode, and what you can. It's literally called evil mode, and as you play through the game, you'll unlock new stages for evil mode, which literally is just a series of combat challenges where they put you in control of the enemy party instead of the player party. So you'll, instead of playing as the heroes, you'll play as a group of orcs or wargs or one of the bosses, including the Balrog at the end of the Moria.
I live my life on evil mode, Peter. But one quick question though: is it the American Balrog or the Japanese Balrog? Because one of them looks like Mike Tyson, and the other one like has a mask and a claw and climbs up fences and stuff.
It's the one that looks like Jack from Final Fantasy X.
Oh, so the one that that the title character fights in the Song of Roland.
Yes, exactly.
Got it. Cool. That's a deep cut literature joke for you listeners there. Any remaining listeners after that awful comment, but.
I also think they made a terrible tactics game for the PSP, but we're not going to talk about that.
Okay, speaking of terrible tactics games for the PSP, okay, well, it works.
Is that a transition?
No, I don't think anything. You know, I may have to edit this out because I don't think that transition fits anything we have on here. Well, okay, there was a terrible D&D PSP tactical RPG that one of my friends played and tried to get me to play, and I was not interested. So we're not going to talk about that. Instead, we're going to talk about Baldur's Gate. Baldur's Gate is a popular Infinity Engine game made by BioWare, and a couple connected studios made different Baldur's Gate games. But both Baldur's Gate and Planescape Torment, and I think Neverwinter Nights as well, are all video game adaptations, RPG adaptations of 3rd edition D&D stuff. Now, Keegan, you have been part of a Dungeons & Dragons Retro Encounter podcast of sorts, as recently as last week. So what's your experience with these Infinity Engine games that are mostly adapted from existing D&D properties?
So I'm also a big fan of Dungeons & Dragons in real life, I DM for a couple of games, I've played in a couple, and I feel like this generation of like late 90s Western RPGs really hit the head of how D&D should feel in a video game.
Oh yeah, they were huge back in the day when I was in middle school and early high school. I want to say that Baldur's Gate 2 was the most popular one from my limited experience. That is, maybe I didn't totally have my finger on the pulse of it, but a lot of those games are real popular. We as I alluded to before, we're doing Planescape Torment episodes of Retro Encounter this month. And but do you have a particular favorite among that group? Is it Torment?
Oh, it is definitely Torment. Something about the atmosphere of that game alone is so oppressive, yet so intriguing. Because it feels like everything in that world wants to kill you. It's not your average fantasy world. There's demons you've never seen before, just weird stuff constantly happening.
It's an amazing
But
set.
I think it's so good. Planescape came into my life at like a very low point for me. I was in college. I was having a rough time. Couldn't afford new video games. I was still running on a PS2 at the time. When I found this older PC game and played it, was a nice space for me. And it'll always have a precious moment in my heart. Maybe one day I'll do a podcast about it. We'll see.
Well, I mean, you already have done a podcast about it in the current timeline we're living in.
Oh yeah, that's right. I do that.
Well, but anyway, I think that it goes without saying. Okay, it does go with saying, because I'm going to say it. these games have not aged perfectly well. There's some clunkiness to that old Infinity Engine stuff. It's not the most intuitive or easy to play RPG framework, but the writing is so outstanding for all of those. Like, you hear about people talking about very fondly about the writing of the side characters of those games, and I haven't played any of them beyond the first few hours of Baldur's Gate 2, but I'm interested in it because they have such a lofty reputation and so many fans, and I think you can get most of them either via Steam or GOG. You should be able to find ports of these games that work on modern machines.
Yeah. Speaking of which, Keegan, I was going to ask you, do you have an opinion on the Beamdog re-releases of these games? Because I know that the reception to them has been mixed.
I haven't had so I've only played the Baldur's Gate and Planescape re-releases, so I don't really know much about 2. I don't even know if they did Icewind Dale. I know that one
did, actually. They did.
Oh, okay. But yeah, I mean, I don't have anything opposed. Some of the old exploits are gone, which I guess is good. But it makes it harder grinding through sometimes. I feel like for a newbie, it's not an issue to play these re-releases. I feel you still get the same amount of magic and enjoyment out of them.
All right. I'm just curious.
But yeah, they're great games. Be prepared to read a lot. It's text-heavy, cinematic, low.
That's what I like.
All right. We have mostly been talking about book series so far in this episode, so we're just a trio of readers on this podcast. But let's get away from boring books and start talking about video games, because I don't know how it happened, but we really started out on the Western side of things for this episode. Peter, around a year ago, maybe a little bit less than a year ago, you and I were on a podcast together talking all about Mario RPGs.
Oh yeah, with Tucker.
Indeed. Tucker was with us for that episode. But so let's not maybe go into quite as much detail as we did then. But I mean, Mario RPGs are maybe even the signature kind of subject for this topic. Mario is a very storied series of platformers, and have been over 10 Mario RPGs from 1996 to the present. So they've been around for 20 years, and there's a bunch of them, and a bunch of them are really, really good. And even since that episode, which I think recorded in April or May, or posted in April and May, we've had a remake of Mario and Luigi Superstar Saga, which came out last fall, and they just recently announced a remake of Mario and Luigi Bowser's Inside Story coming out later this year.
They're both really good games.
Yeah.
I like the art style of the 3DS versions. You do we talk about losing things in transition sometimes, and there's definitely something to be said. But the original version of Superstar Saga is also available on the Wii U's Virtual Console. I don't know if that'll ever come to Switch, because holding on to your Wii U as a Virtual Console box may not be the best way to play these games. Totally not what I'm doing. Don't look at me that way. No, the Mario games are interesting too, because they're not just taking Mario and putting our Mario stuff into a traditional RPG format. They really went all in with adapting the gameplay mechanics to fit Mario. I think that they really make sure they incorporate Mario's jumping and platforming nature into these games with the timed button presses that have sort of become a staple of the combat. Yeah,
even though I want to say at least 4 studios have done various Mario RPGs, because it was Square for 7 Stars, and then Intelligent Systems for the first 2 Paper Mario games, and Alpha Dream for all the Mario and Luigi ones, and I think a different studio for later Paper Mario games. That a bunch of chefs have entered the kitchen for Mario RPGs, but all of them have very bright, colorful visuals. All of them have unique settings and enemies. They don't just throw you into Mario World or Mario 3 and just do an RPG version of that. All of them have very, very distinct settings and unique enemies, and all of them incorporate those timed hit mechanics. And I haven't played all of the Mario RPGs. I've played probably half of them. My favorite is, I think, Thousand Year Door for the GameCube, but all of them have a really sort of fun, anarchic sense of humor, and all of them that I've played are at least above average RPG experiences. Secretly, Mario is one of the best RPG series, even though it definitely didn't start as one. I think I expressed that sentiment on the episode from last year, but it's been a while since I've recorded or listened to it.
Yeah, on a pretty consistent basis, they just deliver. The combat mechanics are satisfying. They're always flashy, fun, colorful games with a good sense of humor about themselves. And sometimes they're not perfect. Like, I mean, I think we can agree, like, okay, Partners in Time is a little it's kind of has too many mechanics going on.
You're doing quite a juggling act between A, B, X, and Y, even during regular fights in that one.
Mm-hmm. And Dream Team is at least twice as long as it needed to be.
I haven't finished Dream Team or Sticker Star, and I think those are the two that are the weakest in the series for me. I think, but I like the first three Paper Mario games. I like Mario RPG for the SNES. There's a lot of good stuff going on in these, and I wholeheartedly recommend listeners, if you haven't already, to go back and listen to that 2017 Mario RPGs episode, because we go through, I think, all of them, at least through Color Splash. You know, I think Tucker was in the middle of reviewing Color Splash when that episode came out. Like he was playing it or something, because I think Paper Jam was out and Color Splash was coming soon, and Tucker was playing it, I think. But it's been a long time since that episode came out.
He had some very specific gripes about that game that were very interesting.
So yeah, Paper Mario and Mario RPG and Mario and Luigi are all lovely Mario adaptations. I'm sorry, RPG adaptations of Mario. I'm going to say the word adaptation like 45 times per minute in this episode. Yeah. It's time to move on. Let's stay into the, realm of semi-mainstream Japanese RPGs. Suikoden is a popular series made by Konami over the years, although I'm not sure we'll ever get another Suikoden, because I'm not even sure if Konami's in the business of making video games people like anymore. But that's
what are you talking about, Mike? Metal Gear Survive is a Game of the Year contender over here.
Don't you dare diss on my Silent Hill pachinko machine.
I will diss on both of those things, but this is not the best time for that.
The guy who designed Pyramid Head designed the generic enemies for Metal Gear 5. I just want to throw that out there because it's really depressing.
It's just depressing meditating for long on Konami in general. The best thing Konami's done in the past year is give Nintendo permission to put 3 of their games on the SNES Classic. That as far as I'm concerned, that's Konami's peak for the past 24 months.
Maybe Duel Links, but that's me talking. So,
Peter, you may be speaking from a position of bias. Just thinking about it, just suggesting
absolutely not 180 hours of that game on my.
Oh, sweet Moses, Peter. So that's what you've been doing instead of appearing on Retro Encounter episodes. Great.
Pretty much. I've been conquering Duelist Kingdom.
Well, all right. To be fair, I may have a game that's been distracting me from recent Retro Encounter as well, but we'll talk about that later. And let's stay with Suikoden for now. Suikoden is very, very loosely based on the Chinese novel Water Margin, also called Outlaws of the Marsh or Bandits of the Water Margin, however you want to translate it. I'm not going to attempt to say the word in Chinese because I will butcher it. But it's one of the sort of classic works of Chinese literature, and it has 108 characters, engaging in all kinds of mayhem and adventures. I've only read about it. I have not read a faithful adaptation of Water Margin myself. But Keegan, what's your Suikoden experience? Keeping it very abridged for the podcast, and or Water Margin in general.
Of course. I started playing Suikoden with the first one actually, but much later in its lifespan. I discovered it randomly at a used game shop. Picked it up, loved it, played through the entire series, actually inspired me to check out the history and look up Water Margin. Now I'm just trying to find a solid translation to experience it correctly, if that makes sense. Sometimes you find a fan translation of these books and it's a little iffy, but being one of the 4 great Chinese novels, I assume it shouldn't be too hard to find a good translation.
Yeah, I have not done a deep dive into it, but I imagine there has to be like a professional English language translation available somewhere. But I mean, again, it's called, to say it's popular would be an understatement, since it's one of the sort of like like saying that's popular is like saying, the Iliad and the Odyssey are popular in the Western world, kind of thing. And Suikoden. The RPGs, which are definitely popular, or at least have a very large cult hit following. It doesn't really adapt the Water Margin straight up so much as borrow the concept of 108 heroes coming together for a greater cause, kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And I have not played any Suikoden game to completion, although I've played parts of the first 3. They sort of exist on their own. Like Suikoden has its own story and a through line from game to game that is not really connected to the original novel.
Yes, I would give it the comparison of Suikoden is to the water margin what the Dragon Ball series is to Journey to the West. It's like the slight touches, you know?
What? You mean that there aren't, alien monkeys in Journey West?
Well, that's why I'm hoping for Suikoden 6, because I want it to really go off the rails.
Suikoden 6, only the duck people from Suikoden 3 are in Suikoden 6.
Don't get my hopes up.
No, it's the opposite of Howard the Duck. There's one human character in a world of ducks. That's Suikoden 6. But so, Peter, have you played any Suikoden games? Do you have any thoughts on the series?
I have not. I've been waiting for us to eventually do hopefully a podcast on one or two, because I have both of those on my Vita. But,
that has popped up before. Pay attention to the man behind the curtain for a second. We do get not a ton of emails, but we do get emails from readers sometimes, retro@rpgfan.com, and probably the most requested game we've had is Suikoden 2.
Oh.
We've gotten I'll say a medium number of requests for that, which is, in the neighborhood of 2 or 3, which is more than any other game that we've gotten. And I know that there are big Suikoden 2 fans on staff that would be interested in being on those episodes. So I think, I'm not going to say we will do a Suikoden 2 episode, but there is interest, and it may yet happen. And I also have not played Suikoden 2, but am interested in doing so I would probably want to be on that episode, should we do it.
The PS2 games are a little prohibitively expensive at the moment.
I have Suikoden 3, and that's probably the one I've played the most, actually. I played I believe Keegan is the night girl in that game. Chris, is that her name?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. I played the beginning of Chris's story and thought that the characters looked good and the sort of political story of it was cool, but I think I was playing that in college, and when I was at college, I would play something for 3 weeks, and then exams would hit, and I would completely forget about it, and then start a new game after exams were over, and that happened like 4 times. So if you ever hear me, I think I've probably mentioned a bunch of on this podcast. Oh, I played that in college, but I fell off the wagon. Like that happened 8 times minimum in college for me. But anyway. So that's our Suikoden story. Suikoden 2 might appear on Retro Encounter later, no guarantees, but now it's out in the open, I might have to do it. We'll see. But Keegan, you mentioned Journey West, and it had a pretty alright RPG adaptation. It's probably much more obscure than Suikoden, but there was a PS1 strategy RPG called Sayuki, which is not based on the Sayuki anime, which is a different adaptation of Journey West. But the Sayuki PS1 game is a pretty good strategy RPG that is a very loose adaptation of the Journey West story. I mean, there's really only 4 or 5 characters you use at once. 3 of them, the Sanzo is the priest main character based on Tong Sung Zang, and then there's the Monkey King, the Pig Demon, and the Sand Demon, whose names I don't totally remember. I know that Sun Wukong or Sun Goku is the Monkey King, but I forget the names of the other 2. I'm sorry. And then they have a couple other characters in addition to the 4 main ones that appear in the game. One of them is a princess or a priestess. I don't remember it perfectly, but who were, I think, minor characters in Journey West, but become sort of main characters in Sayuki. It's a pretty good strategy RPG with a lot of cool boss fights, and half of your party transforms into monsters, and the other half, are like healers and support characters that can make the monster offensive characters stronger. I am sort of assuming neither of you have played the PS1 Sayuki. Is that true?
To be honest, I had not even heard of it before we started preparing for this podcast.
I have the vaguest recollection of this game, but I've never actually played it myself.
Right. Well, it is an adaptation of Journey West, maybe probably slightly more faithful than the Dragon Ball anime, I would say, or the Dragon Ball manga, which is definitely its own thing. But I played it. I don't even remember if I finished it or not. I played it in the early 2000s when I probably not that long after I got a PS1, and really, really liked it, but was very quickly consumed by other PS1 RPGs. Because I mean, when I got a PS1, I remember the first game I had for it was Final Fantasy IX, and I just immediately started playing all of the RPGs I could for it. So Sayuki was buried in there somewhere. I remember liking it. I think it's probably a little obscure, maybe a little hard to find, because I rented it from a Blockbuster, which will give you an idea of how long ago it was. But it totally counts as an RPG adaptation, and I definitely have fond memories of it. That's something I should try to track it down and replay that thing, because that would awaken a very weird part of nostalgia for me, I think.
Right.
Because I was in high school and a lot of stuff was going on, I guess. But I think we're about done with adaptations of great Chinese novels, because I don't even know if is there a Romance of the Three Kingdoms RPG that we can talk about?
I mean, there probably is.
There's probably 40 of them, but they're not on the list, so I don't think we need to deal with it.
There is a Dragon Ball RPG though, isn't there?
Oh,
yes, there is.
Indeed, there is. I think that there's, okay. I mean, slowing it down a little bit, there's probably 100 anime RPG adaptations from the '90s that we didn't play.
Yeah.
Because
possibly didn't even get released. There was a Bleach strategy RPG for the DS. I just remembered that exists.
They made at least 6 Bleach fighting games for the PSP alone. Because I even remember seeing Bleach Heat the Soul 6 on at an import store once. But let's stick to RPGs. And Keegan, there is Dragon Ball Attack of the Saiyans. I think you added that to the list. What system is that for?
That is for the DS original.
Okay. So tell us a little bit about that, because I have not heard of it.
Okay, so fun fact about this game, it was made by a young Monolith Soft, who are now currently famous for the Xenoblade games. The RPG-ness really shines through in this one. All right, so fans of the series, this game takes place between the end of the original Dragon Ball anime up to the end of the Saiyans arc in Dragon Ball Z. So it's not a big time span for the game. I'd probably give it about like 20 hours. It's a bit of a shorter RPG. Party members that you get include Goku, obviously, Krillin, Gohan, Piccolo, and Tien and Yamcha. So a lot of the classic Dragon Ball fighters are in there. The combat is exactly a straight-up turn-based RPG, similar to, a Final Fantasy or Dragon Quest, any classic RPG. What I expect from a Dragon Ball game is usually like intense fighting, and they managed to put that intenseness into an RPG so perfectly. Every attack feels fluid. All of the combos and techniques that you can do, fantastic. And it's all right. I'm gonna be honest. I'm just glad that they gave Yamcha some time in the spotlight. All right, I really needed it. I love him. I think he deserves better.
Yamcha's in Dragon Ball FighterZ, so you can act out your Yamcha fantasies via 3-on-3 intense fighting if you want.
That is true, but he doesn't have the highest attack stat, unlike Dragon Ball Attack of the Saiyans.
Really?
Oh yeah, seriously. Yamcha is physically the strongest, not including your Ki Blast, which functions as magic in this game.
Okay, just as long as he doesn't fight any Cybermen, I think Yamcha's good to go.
Well, we do get to see that Cyberman model, and it's not pretty.
I see. I know. It's funny that you mentioned this game, because I actually remember there's another Dragon Ball Z RPG that Game Informer just did a replay video of it, which is what brought it to mind. It was for the Super Famicom. It's called Super Saiya Densetsu.
Awesome.
Yeah. It's actually canon to Secret of Mana. Fun fact.
Continue.
Really, I remember I had the replay episode on in the background when I was doing something else, and so I don't remember much about this game other than every time you die in the early part of the game, it just shows Vegeta flying towards Earth, and that's the game over screen. Like, you failed and Vegeta won. That's some early Dragon Ball for you, and I kind of love it.
Early DBZ, post Dragon Ball.
Mm-hmm. So there are more Dragon Ball games than there are, like, I don't know, air particles. So
yeah, because it's sort of weird, because Dragon Ball and DBZ basically took place, I think, entirely in the 1980s in Japan. Maybe they went into the early 90s a little bit. But the anime adaptations of those were slowly rolled out into North America and Europe, and became part of the childhood of an entire generation of anime and gaming nerds, including all three of us, I'm assuming. So, if you're at a gaming or an anime convention, I mean, you want to make some friends, like get nostalgic about Dragon Ball, and suddenly you'll be, rolling off to a bar with some people. It is one of the broadest fan bases in the world, I think, at least in our specific spheres of nerddom that we tread in. But there's probably 20 Dragon Ball and DBZ games going back to the Famicom days that never saw the light of day. I know that there was I mean, I'm going to say a dirty word here, but I emulated some real weird Dragon Ball Z Genesis games several years ago that were where sitting around and charging up your Super Saiyan meter was a big part of gameplay. I don't even remember what it was called, but there's so much Dragon Ball video games out there. I am 0% surprised that there are a couple RPGs among them. But Keegan, would you recommend Attack of the Saiyans, or was it at least serviceable?
I would actually highly recommend it. It's definitely on the shorter side. Doesn't have much replay value. If you're a fan of the Dragon Ball series, it is very faithful to what fans expect from these games. And not to mention more Yamcha, so buy it.
He's best boy.
He's the best boy. He's got a talking, transforming cat partner.
Okay, 2009 has 4 stars on Amazon reviews. Seems like an A+ game to me.
Yeah.
Oh boy, let's stay in the realm of anime adaptations for older systems. There's a Sailor Moon Super Nintendo, or I should say Super Famicom RPG, guys, that, say that dirty word again, I emulated many, many years ago because it was on a list, it was on some weird top 10 list of best Super Nintendo, Super Famicom games that never came west or something. This is probably at least 15 years ago. We're talking about. So I downloaded it and tried it. And I thought that the sprites on the main screen looked a little bit like FF6, so I was intrigued. But I can't really say much about it other than it exists and seems like a pretty good, or at least functional, Sailor Moon RPG. And I did see a lot of the Sailor Moon original anime way back in the day, so I was at least interested in it for a while. But it didn't stick to me really. It's not as good as the best Super Famicom RPGs, but it exists. Sailor Moon Another Story or I should say Bishoujo Sailor Moon Another Story is the name of that one. Have either of you guys encountered it before? I'm far from expert level in being able to talk about it.
No, I know it exists. That's about it.
All right, so
I've seen a couple of Let's Players play through it on Twitch and YouTube, and it definitely does give that Final Fantasy VI vibe.
I think it's the proportions of the sprites on the world map is what reminded me of Final Fantasy VI. I'm not saying this game plays like Final Fantasy VI or is as good as Final Fantasy VI. I just had a a visual reaction like, oh, this kind of looks like FF6. But I mean, really, Peter had the most accurate review of all of us. It exists. So, Peter, hitting up you again. What's something else on this list here that we want to tackle?
Ooh, well, let me see. Well, Knights of the Old Republic is pretty awesome.
Sure, yeah.
Star Wars is a topical thing right now.
Yeah, let's pop back into the world of BioWare. Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic was a hugely successful OG Xbox game. I think it was exclusive to that for a little while and then got PC ports later.
KOTOR has an enduring enough legacy that a tiny cameo appearance of one of the ships in Star Wars Rogue One caused my entire theater to go ballistic.
Oh wow!
It's one of those aspects of the extended universe that is so far in the history of the Star Wars universe that even though it may technically be only a legend, quote unquote, it still resonates very powerfully with some, and it's I think it's a lot of people's probably one of the most wide-reaching expanded universe stories outside of maybe the Thrawn novels. And it just does a really good job of immersing you into an unseen side of this universe, and literally getting you to experience the light side and dark side, whichever you see fit.
Yeah, you're right, Peter. That KOTOR is extremely popular. I think it has maybe one of the most famous. I won't say what it is, but one of the most famous twists in RPGs from around that time, with sort of what happens before the game goes into its final act. I have played a fair amount of KOTOR. I even borrowed a friend's Xbox to play it, but I didn't finish it, because I intended to get the PC version later, because I think I was even building my PC at the time, and I was excited to start playing on Steam for things better than my old college laptop. But my video card had a problem running KOTOR. It would whenever I entered combat, I would be unable to exit certain menus, and I'd be frozen in place. So unless saving and reloading every time I finished a battle, that seemed cumbersome to me, so I didn't continue with it. There might be bug fixes for my specific issue that by now, because this was at least 6 or 7 years ago. I was trying to do that.
I'm sure there are. I'm sure there are, because the game has a pretty dedicated fan base. From what I understand, the PC version is a little jank, and especially on modern operating systems, can have a hard time running properly.
Yeah, I did a little bit of research, and I found enough similar issues that made me think it was my video card that was the issue. My video card was too recent to handle KOTOR, which is a weird problem. But
too good.
Yeah, this is bizarre.
Yeah, especially since it was it said it worked on Windows 7, which is what I had at the time. And again, this is like 2011 or 2012. But yeah, Star Wars KOTOR is very acclaimed, very popular. I did play a lot of it on the original Xbox and was really impressed with it. It was I think it was the first BioWare game I ever played. But it was not the first one I ever finished, because I didn't get to the end. But it did have a semi follow-up in the MMO RPG, The Old Republic.
It had a direct sequel as well.
Right. It had KOTOR 2, and that was the that was the Fallout New Vegas people that made that, right?
Obsidian, yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And it continued the proud Obsidian tradition of being way more interesting than the game that came before it, while also being unfinished.
Those Obsidian guys, they have great gameplay ideas and some good writers, but they need some more QA time or something for every game they make.
Yeah, and I don't think that's been their fault. I do think that a lot of that is publisher push. KOTOR 2 is really interesting. It's got some of the most intriguing characters in the Star Wars canon, the Sith triumvirate. There's a trio of Sith Lords in that game. I don't remember one of the. I know Nihilus and Trya are two of them, and they're fantastic characters. The game was released with significant cut contents and a lot of plot holes, but a lot of that content was dummied out, and players were able to mod it back in. And now that mod actually comes with the Steam version by default.
Yeah, I remember reading about that, or no, not reading about it. I'm certain it was a different podcast. I heard someone talk about that on the podcast, and how remarkably dedicated the KOTOR 2 following is, to the point which they've restored a lot of the missing edges. They've smoothed out a lot of the rough edges of the game and restored a lot of the cut content, which is really impressive, because this is over a decade in coming, I think, right? Like it's been. Yeah. So it's been a group of fans working for possibly as much as 10 years building and restoring this game. It's that's really impressive. I have zero experience with KOTOR 2. So do you really need to play the first one to get into the second one?
No, I'd say it's worth playing both of them, but you could probably jump into 2 first.
That's another game that's been suggested for the podcast before, the first KOTOR specifically, but it hasn't happened yet. I think we've had it on our internal votes a couple times. But now I unfairly skipped over KOTOR 2 and tried to talk about this game about 5 minutes ago. But there is an MMO Star Wars game called The Old Republic, or just Tor, or SW Tor, that BioWare's been making. It's had a bit of a I don't know exactly if I'd call it troubled or not, because it started out as a traditional MMO model with a monthly fee, but then they were losing money on it, so they moved it to a free-to-play model that was more successful. And maybe you knew this or maybe you didn't, but Tor is still going on, has had 6 expansions, with the most recent of those being December of 2016. So that thing is still going. I don't know if there's going to be a 7th expansion. This is not something I follow closely. But whenever I hear about the Old Republic news popping up, I sort of think, wait, that thing's still going on?
The little CGI short films they release for the Old Republic are pretty sweet. I've watched a few of those. Haven't played the game myself, though.
I don't know a ton about the game, but I know that you can pick one of several classes, and each class has sort of its own dedicated single-player-ish storyline that has multiplayer functionality. And my one friend that played through multiple characters worth of this game said that the smuggler class was her favorite. So and when you think of of Star Wars fantasies, it's usually either related to being a pilot or related to being a Jedi or Sith. But no, apparently being a smuggler is super cool in the Old Republic. So yeah, good on them for making that interesting.
It's a solid class. I was actually a pretty avid player of Tor right when it hit the free-to-play model.
Okay.
And definitely, it feels like a single player RPG with MMO elements to it, which is a very good thing, in my opinion. Like, BioWare hit the stride
FF14
early.
does that sometimes, but I think that this game might even be more nakedly like that.
I mean, what really shines through that I haven't seen in any other MMO with kind of 14 coming close to it is the interactions with party members, because you can still have party members in the game. Like, they'll follow you on missions and whatnot. I believe you can take them into dungeons, but just like any BioWare game, like, they have their own stories. You can romance some of them. What happens with them will affect your own personal ending to the main storyline.
And that's BioWare.
It's very in depth. Yeah, and I have not played the new expansions, but from what I've heard in the BioWare community of fans is that these new expansions are what everyone wants KOTOR 3 to be.
Interesting.
I've heard nothing but good praise from it. In fact, I believe last time I created a new character, you can skip to the expansions. It's almost like doing a skip potion in a Final Fantasy 14. Like, they just want to take you to the really good content.
It's like, oh, here's a a crystal that gets you to level 60, so you can do the level 60 to 70 content kind of deal.
Yep, pretty much, yeah.
Neat.
For a free-to-play MMO, I think it's pretty good.
Right on. Okay, I wasn't aware you had played Tor. I put that on the list without thinking any of us had played it, which is a very unfair assumption on my part.
Always get little surprises.
But now, guys, we've talked about Baldur's Gate. We've talked about Knights of the Old Republic. Let's talk about the true peak of BioWare RPG mastery. The greatest RPG BioWare has ever made, and that is Sonic the Dark Brotherhood for the DS. The RPG adaptation.
Over, Mario.
The RPG adaptation of the fastest thing alive, Sonic the Hedgehog. Guys, I have played this. I didn't get very far in it, and weirdly, you know what it reminded me of? And this is, I mean, you just said it a second ago, Keegan. It kind of reminded me of a Mario RPG, because there's a lot of platforming-ish interaction with a very cartoony overworld, and combat also has, a bunch of Sonic-flavored characters doing Sonic things. But I mean, this is not an impressive game. It's I don't even. I mean, Sonic fans, bless their hearts, try to defend a lot of games I would not call good. But I don't know if there's many that would defend the Dark Brotherhood.
It's something. I mean, it was an attempt. I mean, hey, Mario did good in RPGs. Why couldn't we attempt with Sonic? But
no, it's not a bad idea. In fact, like. On the surface, it seemed all right, but it's not a great game, man.
You know what doesn't go with fast-paced gameplay? Turn-based combat. Putting the fastest creature alive and making him wait turns doesn't feel fun.
And telling him to spin dash in a menu instead of actual spin dash.
Yeah.
It doesn't work with BioWare-style conversation trees? The dialogue in Sonic Brotherhood.
What are you talking about, Eggman?
It's a lot of shadow, darkness. Oh no, the darkness is here now.
Darkness.
I'm sorry, are we talking about Kingdom Hearts again, or
darkness, light, friendship?
No, we're actually talking about Tokyo Xanadu and Pirates of Dark Water and literally everything.
Oh God!
Doesn't it end on a cliffhanger too? Dark Brotherhood.
Yes, it does. I remember that.
I did not get to the end of this game, so this is a surprise. But sure.
All right, so this is from like 10-year-old Keegan's memory. I believe the second half of the game takes place in another dimension or on another planet. Something like that. Anyways, when the main gang comes back, turns out the whole world has been taken over by Dr. Robotnik, and it ends with a to be continued, and it has never been continued.
Oh, goody. Well, we'll never get. I don't know if we'll ever get Sonic: The Light Sisterhood, but we definitely we definitely got.
Absolutely.
All right, I'll try to trademark that ASAP. But yeah, the Dark Brotherhood was a hell of a weird idea that somehow got on the DS from BioWare of all people. But
yeah,
it was not a smash hit.
That one, I just don't understand that.
Yeah, that is really playing some video game Mad Libs, arriving at that. Sonic RPG with BioWare. Now, continuing with the with platformers becoming unlikely RPGs, there's a handful of Mega Man RPGs out there. And yeah. I am a big Mega Man fan, and perhaps surprisingly, I have not played any of the Mega Man Battle Network games. I don't have a good excuse. I mean, I played an F-ton of Game Boy Advance RPGs way back in the day, and I love Mega Man. I don't know why this one skipped me over, but Keegan, you have played some Battle Network, is that right?
Yes. I touched on it. I don't think I've played all of them. I think I stopped around like 3 or 4. There's a lot of the Battle Network games.
There are 7 entries in the Battle Network series because there's that one GameCube one.
Oh, that's right.
And several of them were divided into 2 versions, like a Pokemon Red Blue kind of situation, right?
There was also
all of them.
There was a complete port of 5 on the Nintendo DS, and then there was also those 3 there's the 3 DS ones that they're not Battle Network; they're a separate series.
Oh, is that Star Force?
Yes, Star Force. That's it.
I couldn't remember the name.
Because I remember, like the Mega Man got weird on the DS because you had like ZX and ZX Advent, which were like new versions of Mega Man Zero. Then you had Star Force, which was like a new version of Battle Network, and none of them were as popular as their predecessor series.
No, but you say what you will about Mario's proliferation into RPGs. There are 11 Mega Man RPGs at least.
If you had me guess that number, I probably would have said 6, and just assuming that there was 5 Battle Network games.
Yep, because you have to include all the Battle Network games plus the GameCube one plus the DS ones plus Command Mission.
Now, Mega Man X Command Mission, which I have finished, is you know what? You can probably skip Mega Man X Command Mission.
Really?
No, it's all right. It is from one of the in-house Capcom teams. I think it's the same group that worked on X7 and X8 because it takes place in between those. Even though Mega Man X himself looks really different, he has like orange outlines on his armor. But it's a it's a game where it's turn-based combat. X-Zero and Axel are in it, if you're a fan of X7 and X8, and they add, I think, 4 or 5 other robots. My favorite one is the lady thief Reploid named Marino, I think was her name. Yeah, Marino, either Marina or Marino. But there's a nurse robot named Cinnamon and a gambler robot named Spider. The enemy is this dude named Epsilon who looks like he's made of feathers and darkness. But it's an okay turn-based RPG. The designs are colorful and interesting. There are some completely ludicrous twists that don't make any sense in the last 2 hours that I don't want to talk about. But it's a functional RPG that I don't think is great. And like if you really like, say, Mega Man X8 and want to see an RPG with characters that look like that, then I guess track down Command Mission. But I wouldn't even put it in a top 15 of PS2 RPGs.
What did you think of Battle Network, Keegan?
I enjoy repetitive at times, mostly when it came to grinding for I believe they were called chips, basically kind of like the card system of the game.
Oh,
instead of sorry.
I want to interrupt really quick. The thing that I thought that was the most disappointing thing about Command Mission is that X-Zero and Axel don't get powers every time you beat a boss.
When?
Yeah, it's just a linear storyline, and you collect items called Force Metal that you customize onto characters that gives them different powers. But it's you don't defeat bosses and gain their powers, which was just awful. But I played through it to the end, and it was it's an okay RPG. But back to Battle Network.
But yeah, so aside from the Mega Man's blaster, a lot of your abilities come from chips. Pretty positive it's chips. Chips that you collect from enemies and bosses, which are what give Mega Man his, Mega Man-like abilities. Well, I want to ask you, Peter, because you're more of a card-based player than I am. What did you think about the systems?
So I didn't play much of Battle Network, truth be told with you. I enjoyed the concept in theory, but like you said, collecting chips kind of got to be a real bore in the first one. And then there's then they made a million more of these games, and I just couldn't. Though I do remember, and this is going way back, they had a spin-off cartoon that was playing.
Yes, they did. I remember that.
Yeah. Battle. What was it called? I don't even know. Access?
I don't remember, but there was an N in there and something was spelled wrong.
NT Warriors. That was it.
Yes, that was it.
Mega Man NT Warriors, and then they had.
That is another thing to add to the list of things I would not think about in 2018 if it was not for this podcast.
But this exists, and I remember it because my friend had she had the toy of the chip reader thing from that, which you could collect figures that came with chips, and occasionally you would have to fight viruses because Mega Man would start buzzing on your thing and be like, "Hey, you need to put chips in me."
Ask your parents for more money so I can survive.
Oh wow!
They really went. They went full ham with it, and no, it was kind of fun.
Now, I don't know how many RPG fan podcasts I've talked about this already on, but we're going to stay in the world of Capcom for a little bit. Because, guys, there was a Monster Hunter RPG that came out last year, and it's not a traditional Monster Hunter action missions multiplayer thing. It was a DS game where you befriend Monster Hunter monsters and ride them, and it has sort of chibi designs. It's called Monster Hunter Stories. We didn't mention it on the Monster Hunter podcast I did a month ago, which seems like a glaring omission right now.
Rectify that.
Yeah, that's my bad. But anyway, Monster Hunter Stories came out last year in the United States, and I think a little bit earlier in Japan. We did have a review on it from around September or October of 2017. I think Nathan reviewed it. But I haven't played it yet, and I think it's because there's just too many video games in general. But have either of you guys tried out Monster Hunter Stories?
I've dabbled in it. I'm not super far. I only have like 2 monsters. But it's very entertaining. You still have the whole aspect from Monster Hunter of collecting items from defeated monsters to build yourself new gear. But
that is basically all of Monster Hunter, so yeah.
Yeah, I've heard that's part of it, so... But with the addition of rideable monsters and them fighting in combat, it's a nice little thing.
I've heard people say, and that includes our own favorite social media manager, Steph, that it is basically their favorite Pokemon game because it like the collection aspects of it and the very varied menagerie of monsters in it are cool designs and cool to collect and see in your party, but it has other things like you hatch monsters from eggs and try to get the best combinations of them and pass skills from monster to monster, and you can fight alongside them and ride them and not just have them fight other monsters in like some horrifyingly sanitized version of cockfighting. But but no, it had a positive reception, and I think a lot of the Monster Hunter community does not give a damn about it because they want to hunt monsters their way.
Oh yeah.
But it has a following and did have a positive reception.
I think I'm gonna have to try it. It's been on my list on my radar just because I feel like I feel like I'd be pretty bad at the mainline Monster Hunter games, but this looks more my speed.
It looks cool. I have almost bought it like a dozen times probably, but I think I was when it was out, I was more hotly anticipating Monster Hunter World and less interested in playing stories. But
if you ever want to see an adorable Rathalos, like pick up Monster Hunter Stories. These monsters get cute.
Okay, all right, man. I don't know if I should say this on the podcast. I have seen an adorable Rathalos because I received a Rathalos Funko Pop as a gift for my birthday last month. So yeah, I have an adorable Rathalos a few shelves over from this computer desk. In fact,
it's kind of awesome.
Yeah, there are a handful of Monster Hunter Funkos, and Rathalos is one of them, and it is very cute.
The more you know.
Mm-hmm. So I think it's enough talk about Monster Hunter Stories. Again, I don't know how it happened, but I've talked about Monster Hunter on like 4 podcasts in 2018 already. I feel like I'm getting away with something. Really? Like I don't have to pay to do this? I'm doing this for free?
This is going to be Retro Encounters' version of Dark Souls references.
God, we actually compared Monster Hunter to Dark Souls in the last episode of Random Encounter I was on, which seems like some kind of singularity. I think we also talked about Diablo in the same conversation. So like everyone collect your Random Encounter bingo card right now because just everyone won. But we're going to jump around a little bit. Guys, I don't know if you remember this, but there was a DS game about 10 years ago called Glory of Heracles, which was a sort of a traditional fantasy RPG that probably resembled 18,000 other Japanese RPGs, but set in the realm of Greek myth. Now, maybe you heard of it, maybe you haven't, but maybe you also knew that it's the 5th Glory of Heracles game or something. There have been Heracles RPGs in Japan since the days of the original Famicom, and I think I could be wrong here. I think it was 2 on Famicom, 2 on Super Famicom, and then another 1 or 2 on DS in the DS GBA range. But the only one that's come out in English is one of the DS ones. And I did buy it and play it. It's buried in my 2 large DS collections somewhere. I didn't get that far because I think I played it during college. Oh, it's another one of those. But But it was functional. You met fairies that gave you elemental powers. Everyone was wearing tunics. It's a very bright, colorful game, but with mostly traditional 2D, not 2D, traditional turn-based combat. But it wasn't bad. I didn't hate it. I just forgot about it. So, any of you guys played Glory of Heracles or aware of the other ones?
I'm not sure if it was a Random or Retro or some other podcast, but I remember hearing about it and being thoroughly just neutral. Just like, oh, that's a game.
Well, back in the day, I used to subscribe to Nintendo Power magazine before they went under, and this was around the time I was like really kind of starting to become more aware of JRPGs and getting into them. And I think also that the magazine during the Wii and DS years really had to scrounge for coverage a bit. So they would often give more niche titles a bit more of a spotlight, which was kind of interesting. And Glory of Heracles was kind of like okay, this is another RPG coming to the DS, and this one's really interesting and based on Greek myth. And I'm like, oh, that's cool. And then I never played it. And then I found out after the fact there were like 5 of these things. And
there might be more than 5. I think this is the 5th one. I could be wrong about that. I just know that there was a bunch, and when I first heard of them, I was surprised that they ever existed. I think there's a partial fan translation out for one of the Super Famicom ones.
Yeah.
But I
enjoy Greek mythology, so I feel like
sure.
I dig these.
All right, so that's Glory of Heracles. Keegan, you added something to the list that I was kicking myself for not thinking of myself. The X-Men Legends and Marvel Ultimate Alliance games. They were 4 RPGs in the PS2 and PS3 era. I've played all 4 and really liked all 4 to varying degrees. My favorite one is probably X-Men Legends 2 because it's probably the best version of the Apocalypse story, because that definitely isn't X-Men Apocalypse. The 4 pretty good RPGs with surprisingly great co-op, I would say.
Oh my goodness, yes.
Like MUA 2, I would say would be the worst one, except that the co-op is awesome because every pair of characters has like a dual super move that you can time with other players. It's great. Like it almost replaced the hole in my heart that was left there when Seiken Densetsu stopped being good. But yeah, those 4 games, they all touch weird corners of the Marvel universe. I mean, like part of X-Men Legends 2 takes place in the Savage Land, for Christ's sakes. So Keegan, which of those have you played, and what are your thoughts on them?
I've actually played all except Legends 1, I believe.
Legends 1 is a bunch of New York City X-Men Mansion Sentinels and fighting Magneto.
So I'm not missing out on much, is what you're telling me.
It's a bunch of late 70s, early 80s X-Men stories. Wrong X and wrong men. That's my bad. It's fine, but X-Men Legends 2 is better.
Oh yeah, I think my favorite is probably Ultimate Alliance 1, but that was the first one I was introduced to, and it was the one I went through completely in co-op with 3 other friends.
Oh yeah.
So that's a little bit of nostalgia love in my heart that Ultimate Alliance 1 will always have. I was always Spider-Man. I love him. He's my favorite.
My experience with them was actually kind of surprisingly varied. I played through X-Men Legends 1 with my best friend, played it almost entirely 2 players. We each basically drafted characters, and so half of them were Mike characters and half of them were David characters.
Yeah, exactly.
And we played through the whole game together. And then I played it again by myself later. I think playing a bunch of David characters he wouldn't let me use when we were 15, or maybe I was 16 or 17. I don't remember. But then I played X-Men Legends 2 by myself. But I decided to only use the 4 Brotherhood characters, which was a shockingly good team. Like, I don't know, Toad should not be that strong in any video game, but he was like,
I don't think I ever used him.
You can build him either for a mucus build or a tongue build, and both of them are way too strong for being freaking Toad in a Marvel game.
I'm absolutely not going to take Mike talking about mucus and tongue out of context.
Oh boy. We should be roommates again at E3 this year, Peter. But
if I can make it, we'll see.
But anyway, and then I did play through MUA 1, I think mostly solo. I played that one last of the 4, weirdly, but did have a dedicated group that played MUA 2 together with, and man, that game is incredible multiplayer. Like, all of them are good multiplayer, but MUA 2 just, you know what, we're just going to have the storyline just be a big old shrug about Civil War and nanomachines, and didn't just make amazing 2-player attacks, and that's what they did.
Did you guys have to fight it out between going with Cap or Iron Man's team?
Oh no, all of us were so pro Cap that it was not even a question.
I know, right? But, sorry, I'm getting angry at friends I haven't seen in years. That's an argument that still lingers.
In the comics and in the modern MCU, I think Iron Man has a better argument, but they make it they make in MUA2 they make it so do you support freedom or do you support an oppressive regime? That it's a little one-sided. It's more the Civil War storyline is more nuanced in the comics and in Captain America: Civil War, and it's not even that nuanced in those.
I'd say the movie does a better job of making the characters nuanced and complicated. The Civil War comic is yeah.
The Civil War parts of MUA2 are not great. But you'll get a bunch of great stuff like Captain America saying, "I wear the flag. That means I don't lose," and like just a bunch of great Marvel cheese and really good multiplayer in all 4 of those games. But in MUA2 might have the most cheese and the best multiplayer.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that's enough talking about superheroes. Let's talk about body horror and weird Japanese sci-fi novels.
Oh boy.
Yee.
So
this is my speed.
I have not played any Atlas RPG older than Persona 1, which gives me, Persona 1 was my Vietnam, let's just say.
I think that gives you superhuman powers.
Maybe. Oh, maybe I get to cameo in Marvel Ultimate Alliance 3. Shin Megami Tensei has many, many dedicated fans that know much more about Shin Megami Tensei than I do. So I don't want to sound condescending, but you may know that the first Megami Tensei games were for the Famicom and were based on a novel called Megami Tensei. I believe a Digital Devil story or something, because it's about like early internet, early computers, demons inside the machine kind of situation.
That is correct.
And the first 2 Megami Tensei games, I believe, were made by Namco and not Atlas. And Atlas sort of created the modern SMT with the first Shin Megami Tensei, which are follow-ups to these 2 games.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, they add the new prefix on there.
Yeah,
different.
Shin, which means true or new, or a bunch of things that the Japanese language is more nuanced than I'm making it seem, I guess. But but I don't know anything about SMT or regular MT games before Nocturne or Persona 2, because I've blocked most of Persona 1 out of my memory. So do you guys know anything about these novels or old Megami Tensei?
So I never read the novels, but I did watch the animated movie based on the first novel, and it has those SMT vibes to it way back then. Mostly, I'd say, in the character design. A lot of the designs still ring true even to this day in, modern SMT and Persona games.
And I know that one of the old Megami Tensei novels has a Izanagi-Izanami story allegory in it, and that's referenced heavily in Persona 4.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Which is a callback I wasn't aware of until I was reading everything I could about Persona 4 several years ago. But so they go real deep into the mythology and sort of digital devil weirdness in this book.
Yes, a very interesting thing that somebody pointed out to me about the original book and animation is how a lot of the villainous gods and creatures come from Western mythology and like Christianity and stuff, while the good gods and goddesses are very much Shinto and Eastern religions. I just found that as a little interesting, Which I forgot to mention that the big bad of the first book is the god Loki, who I think everyone knows who Loki is at this point, thanks to Marvel.
I was to say, is he played by Tom Hiddleston?
Yes, amazingly enough.
Oh well, that's some fourth dimension. Right there.
The Megami Tensei Loki is a giant blue monster, which it's a new interpretation that I've never seen of Loki.
No,
you clearly need to go rewatch Thor 1. I don't do that actually, but
don't tell me to have a bad time, Peter. All right.
It has Kat Dennings. It's not that bad, but yeah, whatever.
And it also has Stellan Skarsgård, who's a cool dude.
Yes, he was a wonderful actor, and it has that Branagh cheese.
Thor 1 is bad. It's one of the worst. It's one of the worst modern MCU movies. I don't recommend it. But I mean, the old SMT and regular MT games, where the different factions of Hindu gods here, Norse gods there, Judeo-Christian gods there, traditional Japanese gods there, all in different factions with different belief systems, is a fascinating exercise, and I experienced them mostly in cameo form by playing the Persona games.
Yeah,
but
I feel like that would be interesting to revisit the origins of that series at some point. Perhaps if Atlas continues their remake trend.
Yeah, because they did a mobile phones version of SMT1, I think. But that's
available in the West.
Yeah, that's SMT, not regular MT. And the books from the 1980s, or maybe just one or two books, is just MT. Then it had 2 Namco games, and then from early 90s onward, a bunch of Atlas games.
So I'm sure where the rights for that would fall.
Yeah, but I mean, I wouldn't know that either. But I mean, sometimes RPG fan is even called Atlas fan or SMT fan. So, yeah, I mean, you know we have a bunch of people on staff that really like those.
And just salted the Persona 5 one game of the year.
Final Fantasy 15 and Persona 5 back-to-back games of the year that created a lot of fan salt. Surprisingly, but anyway, we don't need to talk about 2016 and 2017 games. Let's go back to 1999-2000 and talk about Parasite Eve.
Oh yeah.
Now, we had a Parasite Eve episode, or I think maybe 2 episodes, way back in 2015, the year of our podcast's birth. Maybe you knew, maybe you didn't, that it is based on a Japanese sci-fi novel that was made into a live-action movie. And Parasite Eve is intended to be a sequel to that novel. Am I correct in that brief abridged summary?
I believe you are correct.
All right.
I think that they directly reference another incident in Parasite Eve, the game, and the Doctor made a character in general. I think they're both meant to be references to the novel.
Cool. So have any of us seen the movie or read the novel? Because I've played Parasite Eve 1, and it's excellent. I mean, I think I wasn't on that podcast episode, but I believe that it was a very celebratory episode, pretty much. But
yeah, one of my favorite games of all time. I still haven't checked out the source material, though. I really ought to one of these days because I'm kind of fascinated. This series has a long, weird, tumultuous track record of like the source material that spawned it all. 1 completely amazing game, and then 2 absolutely trash sequels. Yeah, it's to be one thing where I'd like to go back and examine the roots of it myself.
Cool. Keegan, have you played any of the Parasite Eve games or are familiar with the novels or movie?
Parasite Eve is one of the series that I have unfortunately missed out on. I have bought the first 2 on my Vita. Okay. I've heard great things about Parasite Eve 3, but I'll wait on that one. I heard nothing but praise for it. But yeah, this series is...
Sorry.
Whoa, you okay, Peter? Okay.
I'm having flashbacks.
Oh my!
Oh man!
I guess the 3rd birthday was your Vietnam. So anyway, Parasite Eve. Listen to the episode. Play Parasite Eve 1. Maybe do some research into that novel and the movie. But I'm not even sure if they're available in English. I didn't do any research on it prior to this episode. But that's on me. Anyways, gentlemen, we have gone through this big list of adaptations that we concocted in the 30 minutes before recording. I'm sure there's stuff we missed. Great RPGs based off of non-RPGs, or novels, or films, or vague works of semi-fiction like Greek myth. I think we had a pretty good collection, so now we're going to move into the final phase of this episode, in which, similar to the spin-offs episode from 2 weeks ago, each of us presents an idea of an RPG adaptation of a non-RPG property. It can be another video game, could be a book or a movie or a television series, anything you can think of. And then the other 2 panelists react and discuss and talk about how cool a thing that could be. So Keegan, I'm going to pick on you. You're going to go first. Give us your pitch for a hypothetical RPG adaptation.
No problem. So for those who've listened and those who follow me on Twitter, you could probably tell that I'm a pretty big anime fan. And I specifically love shonen, and I'm currently addicted to the anime My Hero Academy.
Boku no Hero Academia.
I feel that the series would lend itself very well to an RPG. You have a very large list of characters, each with differing abilities and functions that they can perform for a team. I'm kind of debating, because now that we've talked about Marvel Ultimate Alliance, that's kind of in my mind, and I'm like, not working well with a big, superhero anime system. But something along those lines, or a classic turn-based system, I feel could really work. Maybe even introducing player-created characters. I mean, there's such a long list of abilities that people can have in this world. I don't think it would be impossible to allow players to customize a hero of their choosing.
Right on. And you're absolutely right. Like shonen manga, which is I apologize for not translating this earlier when we mentioned shonen earlier this episode. I think shonen means boy. Shonen manga or shonen anime refers to material whose target audience is boys. It's usually fast-paced action. I think I consider shonen manga the equivalent of superhero comics, basically. Mm-hmm. And My Hero Academia is rather nakedly inspired by Western comics, since it's about a world of superheroes where most people in the world are born with a power called a quirk. I don't see the anime, but I do keep up with the My Hero Academia manga, and it's very good. The cast is very diverse. There's a wealth of material they could draw from. Created characters could be possible in this setting. It's a good manga, and I support an RPG adaptation 100%.
Awesome.
I think that'd be a really awesome idea as well. Yeah, I haven't watched the show myself, but it's been on my short list once I get through One Punch Man. I'm catching up on a lot of anime I missed.
You know, it's sort of fun. Like Shonen Jump, which is probably the most popular shonen magazine, had a really strong run in the early 2000s when sort of One Piece, Naruto, and Bleach were all happening at the same time. But then then they had a big explosion of support when Death Note happened, which was a big sensation for about 2 years. But they've sort of been falling off a little bit again with like all of their series other than One Piece aren't doing great. But recently, like My Hero Academia and to a lesser extent Black Clover, like I think they're making a comeback. Like there's good shonen out there now, and it's more. I've not been this positive about new manga coming out like maybe ever, because I started reading manga because I wanted to, because God, this is gonna date me so hard, but like I started reading manga online because around 2004-ish I was sick of One Piece and Naruto filler and decided to go to the source directly, and then and then I've been reading manga ever since. But My Hero Academia is real good. So Peter, give me your pitch for an RPG adaptation of some non-RPG material.
Okay. So my pick, which I've mentioned something similar along these lines before, would be a Kirby RPG.
Oh yeah, hit me with that pastel colors and turn-based combat.
Yeah, and honestly, I don't think it would be much of a stretch to take the existing Mario RPG format and apply it to Kirby. And I'm saying this mainly because I also want Alpha Dream to do something else. I think they're very talented developers that have a really good thing going for them, but they've also developed 5 Mario RPGs and now 2 remakes of those games.
And Tomato Adventure for the GBA.
Yes, this is true. We mustn't forget about Tomato Adventure.
You damn well better not forget about Tomato Adventure.
Another episode of Deep Cuts with Sollosi.
We're hitting all of them today.
We're gonna do 5 Tomato Adventure themed episodes in 2019.
Believe it. I'm gonna hold you to that.
Please don't.
But for real though, when I'm just thinking about it, the Kirby games already have a very charming kind of cutesy art aesthetic that I think would be easily translatable to more of a top-down 2.5D-esque environment, kind of like the Mario RPGs. And Kirby's main gimmick in game is copying the abilities of his enemies, and I feel like that could be worked into an RPG combat system fairly well. Like what if you enter a battle, but instead of like the Mario RPGs where you have to time button presses, you have to suck up enemies and gain their powers, and that gives you a different moveset. I just feel like there's some applications from a gameplay perspective that would make that fun, and it's just one of those things where again I'd like to see Alpha Dream branch out a little bit beyond the Mario franchise.
Not only is that a great idea, I think, but one that you didn't go into. There's a handful of non-Kirby characters in the Kirby universe that could be really interesting party members.
Oh yeah, Meta Knight or
Meta Knight, Meta Knight, Day to Day, Mr. Frosty, Lololo, La La La, Mr. Shine, Mr. Bright. Any of those could be cool party members or boss fights.
Yeah, so I could see that they already have a wealth of material to draw from.
Yeah, but I mean, it goes without saying, the first boss would have to be Wispy Woods, and this probably the seventh or eighth boss would have to be Krakow, the floating lightning eyeball.
And if as long as we're spitballing, I want them to put in a Kirby's Avalanche reference in there somewhere, because that was my first exposure to Puyo Puyo, and I love it.
And please bring back the spaceship from Kirby's Adventure, because I think that's only in that game, and that's a terrible shame. Because that's it's one of the coolest powers in Kirby history, but it's only in one stage in one game. It's like the Tanuki suit of Kirby.
maybe have Kirby's original design be an unlockable skin or something.
Oh god, the weird white Kirby with red shoes.
Yeah, that one.
Oh man,
or he's the villain like in Epic Mickey with Oswald.
Oh yeah, God,
I like that.
Yeah, God, Oswald in Epic Mickey is one of the deepest deep cuts that you could possibly make in an adaptation. Hell, Jesus, I mean, hey, let's go back for a second. Hey, Epic Mickey is a cool adaptation that's not quite an RPG, and maybe so is Kingdom Hearts, but we don't need to talk about either of those. But anyway, Peter, I like your idea for a Kirby RPG a lot. That world is big and colorful and has a lot of potential.
Oh yeah, super. I like it a lot, especially with OG Kirby boss fight.
Yeah, I want Kirby Roth.
Like, I've been throwing money at my microphone since you started talking about this. So,
all right, we're giving thumbs up to both Kirby RPG and My Hero Academia RPG. But now, guys, you might know this about me. I'm a person of diverse interests, and one of my interests is old kung fu movies from the 70s.
Go on.
All right, and maybe you've seen this movie, maybe you haven't. But one of my favorite old school kung fu movies is The Five Deadly Venoms.
Oh, that's new to me.
Do you know this one? It's very old Shaw Brothers. Shaw Brothers was a studio that used a lot of the same actors and stunt guys for a lot of old kung fu movies. And and Five Deadly Venoms is one of the best ones. But I'll give you an abridged version of the story. Okay.
Okay.
There's a dying kung fu master, and he has his final student. The students refer to themselves as brothers, so this final student is sixth brother, or brother 6, right? And so he's on his deathbed talking to brother 6. He said, "Look, I hid my entire fortune in this small town, and your 5 brothers, previous brothers, all know about it, and they're all going to be going for it to try and get their inheritance. And each of the previous 5 students of his has a special kung fu power based on a poisonous animal. Like the the centipede fist guys can have his hands move lightning fast, and the lizard fist guy can walk on walls and ceilings and stuff. And scorpion fist has kicks that can break walls and a grip that can break people's arms easily. It's really goofy kung fu with sort of 5 main characters plus this 6th main character. And brother 6 goes to the small town and sort of observes the other 5 fighting over this inheritance and trying to find it. And one of the brothers, brother 3, his identity is unknown to the other 4 because brother 1 and brother 2 know each other, and brother 4 and brother 5 know each other, but no one knows who 3 is. And his and he's like a special plot twist final battle kind of thing in the movie. So anyway, I envision an RPG adaptation of Five Deadly Venoms as you are a kung fu student trying to search for his master's inheritance, and there's 5 other kung fu masters in the same town, all searching for the same thing. And in sort of maybe a branching paths, chaos, order, neutral path kind of thing, you can choose which of your previous senpai even to pick as your master to learn his abilities and defeat the other masters. Is my vision for what a video I've wanted a Five Deadly Venoms video game or anime or anything basically for at least a decade since I saw the movie when I was in my late teens, early 20s, and I'm in my early 30s. So yeah, so it's one of my favorite old school kung fu movies that really hasn't had any kind of adaptation, and I would love for it to have an RPG video game adaptation. So does that sound remotely interesting to either of you?
I like it. I think it's a really interesting idea. Kind of. There's a video game that you've talked about a lot, Sollosi. It was a Super Nintendo one where you picked one of 7 characters and you would encounter the other characters throughout the entire story.
The Seventh Saga. Yep.
Yes. I'm getting a vague idea of that just from replayability of picking different masters on each story and still encountering these other masters.
And I guess in this analogy, King Lamil in Seventh Saga is kind of like the dying master in Five Deadly Venoms.
Yeah, I like it. I think it's a solid, cool idea. Also, I just want more Kung Fu RPGs.
I'm kind of picturing this weird mix of like Dragon Quest IV and Yakuza, and it sounds the greatest game ever made. So
I like that a lot.
Like just have that sounds like it could really work. Like I mean, I can see like maybe you have to explore and pat down people for information, or there could be side quests that are like false leads but unlock stories of their own, because you'd be on the lookout for tip-offs, and that could be a good way to introduce side quests into the narrative and get you into like some crazy fights or whatever. And I like the sound of this a lot.
Right on.
Oh yeah, I agree.
So but anyway, both directed at you guys and directed at listeners, if you ever have any curiosity about old school kung fu at all from the 70s and 80s, just look up Shaw Brothers stuff like Five Deadly Venoms or 36th Chamber of Shaolin or Crippled Avengers. A lot of great stuff there.
Wait, you said the name Crippled Avengers?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, hold on. Was that the one where one guy only had legs and the other guy was only a torso?
No.
Okay, so that's a movie I need to find now.
No, it's 3 or 4 guys that all encounter this this sort of gang leader that runs a town, and in an early fight in the movie, the gang leader cripples each of them. Like one guy's blinded, and one guy has his part of his back broken, and one guy has a head injury that makes him sort of slow, and then they're picked up by a kung fu master who teaches them kung fu that lets them overcome their disabilities, and then they return to the town to beat up the gang leader.
Okay, that does sound really cool.
And because it's Shaw Brothers, it has some of the same guys from Five Deadly Venoms in it. So it's you'll if you watch old kung fu movies, if you watch them within one studio, like Shaw Brothers is maybe one of the most famous ones, you'll see a bunch of the same actors in different roles, and they're so good. Like, I love old school martial arts movies, and but Five Deadly Venoms is probably my favorite from that era, and has one of the most colorful gimmicks of movies movies of that type. So, guys, we have talked about a lot of RPGs, both real and hypothetical, in this episode. Thank you so much for joining me, and listeners, thank you for listening to us. We have a lot of exciting times ahead of us in Retro Encounter. Next week, we have our second Planescape Torment episode, which, Keegan, I know you will be involved in. You and Rob Fenner have been recording those. And and after that, we're doing a special Super Nintendo episode that is still in the planning stages. It's kind of a sequel to the SNES Encounter episode we did like 2 years ago, but it's a little different. You'll see what that is in about a week and a half or 2 weeks. And I think we announced this last week, Keegan, but I wasn't on the Planescape Torment episode, so I don't exactly remember if that went that way or not. But April is going to be the Legend of Zelda month for Retro Encounter. We are going to do 4 Zelda episodes in a row. I don't know if I want to talk about all the episodes yet, but we did do a public poll for one of them, so one of those episodes is going to be about The Legend of Zelda, the Minish Cap, but there's going to be 4 episodes in a row all about Zelda, and I'm really excited to record those. We haven't recorded any of them yet, so I don't know how they've gone yet, but that's going to be a fun time talking about Zelda with RPG fan peeps. But listeners, if you want to get in touch with us to give us feedback or suggestions or what have you, the best way to do so is email us at I said the at too early. The email is retro@rpgfan.com. You can also find us on Twitter at rpgfancom. Go to rpgfan.com and check out the message boards there, or go on Facebook and search for RPG Fan. We read everything that is directed to us, so please engage with us however you prefer to. And also, you can review us on iTunes or Google Play or wherever you're getting this podcast. We love feedback. We always want feedback. Please feed us back. So, starting with you, Peter, what's the best way for listeners to get in touch with you?
All right. Well, listeners, if you want to get in touch with me, I have Fury on the boards. That's also my Twitter handle. You can also reach out to me, Peter T at rpgfan.com, with any news inquiries or questions about the podcast or what have you.
All right, Keegan, your turn. Same question.
All right. If you guys are looking for me on the RPG Fan forums, I'm Fozzie Bear over there. But really, the best way to get in contact with me, to give me, critiques or praise or what have you, is I'm very active on Twitter, and my handle is Kaylee Brand over there. I'm still playing through the Danganronpa series in my free time, so I'm tweeting a lot about that.
And you should listen to our 3 Danganronpa episodes as you get to the appropriate parts in those games.
Oh, that's right. I forgot. We have a Danganronpa 2 episode, don't we? I need to go back and look for that.
Yeah, there's Danganronpa 1, which is split into 2 episodes. Peter, you, Alana, and I were on those. And, and also a standalone Danganronpa 2 episodes with the same cast. But those were all really fun to record. So, listeners, and Keegan, I suggest that you check those out. But before I go into my own things, I forgot to mention something. We do have streaming on the RPG Fan Twitch page, basically every evening, going by North American time, with a team of 4 or 5 regular streamers and a couple other less regular streamers. Basically every week, every night of the week, there's something streaming on that page. So, but if you check out RPG Fan's main page or Facebook page or Twitter, you'll see what's going on and what's being streamed at any time. I know Caitlin recently finished an Okami stream. Scott is playing through a bunch of Tales of games. Kyle is playing through Secret of Mana with his wife on his day of the week, which I think is Friday. But check out one of those RPG Fan sources to find out what's being streamed when. Also, there is an RPG Fan Discord. It's just called RPG Fan. You can find it on the main RPGFan.com page to get to get an invitation and get in. It's there's so much discussion going on in there. It is impossible for me to follow all of it, but there is a lot of cool discussion going on there that's probably more active than the forums these days. So please check that out if you enjoy Discord. But if you want to reach me specifically, the best way to do so is probably via Twitter. I am at @TheRealMonsoon and also at Evoker for Dogs when I want to pop off about Japanese superheroes mostly. And I'm also Monsoon on the forums and Monsoon Mike on Discord. Let's see, man. This one went a little long. We talked about a lot of different things, and I got to talk about kung fu movies for the first time on Retro Encounter. So that's a win-win-win.
I support this. Do it more often. It's
right on.
Yes,
enlightening.
I mean, we are the random channel, right? Like, we are the random episodes.
There is literally a different podcast with random in the title on our website, and we are not that podcast. But I would be remiss to say that we don't get random sometimes. Sure, you get a pass this time, Keegan.
Off topic was the word I was looking for. Random is what came out.
Listeners, thank you. Good night and good luck.
Good night, everyone.
Good night, folks.